What's going on YouTube? Now it's safe to say that the Kia Stinger has certainly made a splash, not just within the Kia brand itself, but within the entire auto industry. Particularly among enthusiasts, it's gotten a lot of attention. But if you weren't already paying attention, Kia now has a bright orange bullet ready to penetrate your consciousness. This is the limited edition Stinger GTS, one of only 800, which is why we headed out to Cartown Kia as soon as we found out about it. Of course, we do want to especially thank them for giving us access to this rare vehicle, and if you're in the market for any new Kia, make sure you stop by their dealership or visit them via their website, which we provided a link to in the video description. So with that all said, let's see if the performance is as intense as the color. So beginning things here on the outside, Kia has made it real obvious that this is the high performance Stinger. The biggest clue, of course, is going to be this extremely eye-catching Federation Premium Orange paint job, which has a very deep and bold color seeing it in person. But once you can get past the color, there have been some other changes, namely the addition of real carbon fiber trim around the grille and in various other parts of the vehicle. Otherwise, your headlights are full LED just like the regular GT. As far as the styling out back, it has the same formula applied to it as the front. So you have genuine carbon fiber trim tracing the exhaust pipes and the lower diffuser. You'll also notice that the Kia badge has been deleted from the back in favor of the Stinger script, which is a popular thing that many Stinger owners were already doing. Obviously, this is still a great looking sportback body, set off by quad exhaust pipes and the full-length LED taillights. But all in all, the GTS takes all the good things about the Stinger's design and simply ramps them up to a new level. Now beyond the aesthetics, the other things on the outside really haven't changed. These are the same 19-inch contrast alloys that the regular GT has, and you have the same Brembo brakes. Of course, just like in the front and back, you will find carbon fiber on the side vent and the mirror, which comes with the same heating, power folding, and blind spot monitoring abilities as other Stingers. It is also worth mentioning that beyond BSM, the GTS doesn't have any of the DriveWise safety systems since it's based on the basic version of the GT. If you want to have the DriveWise features, then you'll have to choose the GT1 or the GT2. But anyways, that's it for the extreme exterior. So now let's go ahead and see what special touches Kia has made to the inside. So as with every Stinger, the GTS does also come standard with Kia's Smart Entry system, as well as their really nice new key fob with the leatherette material, the real stitching detail, and then the buttons over here on the side inside of this metal trim. This particular model does also have the remote start system installed. Now heading up to the vehicle itself, like every Stinger, all you have to do to get inside the vehicle is just press the little black button. And when you do, the power mirrors will also come out. Alright, so checking out the cabin of the Stinger GTS. As you can see, it mostly does share the same design language as the normal GT Stingers. However, you will notice there are several unique touches inside of this cabin. Now what you're looking at here is the only interior combination that you can choose for this GTS, and that's going to be the black real leather seating. Now turning over here to your door trim, it is very nicely appointed. Of course, you do have a nice leather material across the entire armrest, as well as all this area above it with the color contrast stitching. The top is also soft touch, and you have real aluminum trim, which is shared with the regular GT model. Now you will notice we are missing the memory seats, and that's because this, like I said, sits in between the GT and the GT1, so it mostly shares equipment with the GT model. Of course, you do have aluminum pedals as well as the aluminum scuff board. And as far as the seats themselves, you will notice these are the 12-way power adjusting seats with 4-way lumbar support. And like I was already saying, this is the standard real leather. It does feel very nice. As you can see, it's got a nice design with color contrast stitching as well. So the main parts of this cabin are like your typical GT Stinger, which means you have very nice quality materials. So across the upper dash, you do have a nice soft touch plastic with the real genuine stitching detail. And then dropping down to the middle here, we have a nice leatherette material that runs all through there. Down in your lower portions, you do have some piano black, and we have all this center console covered in a real brushed aluminum that looks very, very nice. Now to start the vehicle, of course, all you gotta do is press the button. When you do, you will notice the standard 8-inch display fire up. You'll notice that is not shared with the regular GT, that's actually shared with the GT1. Now as far as the gauges here, this is the basic setup for the Stinger. So you do have a 3.5-inch multifunction display. It does have the standard affair of information, so you can just use the steering wheel mounted button here to cycle through stuff, including for your driver's assistance systems. But coming back to the steering wheel, this is where you find the GTS exclusive full Alcantara steering wheel. It does have the flat bottom design that all the GTs have, but like I said, we have full Alcantara covering from top to bottom. Definitely feels very nice and adds to that super sporty feel. As far as your buttons, these remain the same, so you've got your voice, audio, and phone controls, as well as your buttons for your cruise control. Obviously, we do have aluminum paddle shifters, as you would expect, and the steering wheel itself is manually tilt and telescoping, and we also do have steering wheel heating. But anyways, in regards to storage, the Stinger actually has a lot more than you'd expect for a vehicle like this. So starting out with your center console here, I do also want to point out, this is covered in Alcantara the same way as the steering wheel. And then inside you have a really large center console with a removable tray. Within this car's competitive set, this is much more storage than what you find in like an Audi S5, for instance. S5 Sportback. You do have some storage up here in front of that, 2 cup holders inside of this aluminum trim, and then you can press this portion up and you will find another large storage bin with this portion actually serving as a wireless phone charger for you to slide your phone onto. You will also find a traditional USB port, aux jack, and a 12-volt outlet if you don't want to use the Qi wireless phone charger. Now surprisingly, even though you got this much storage, you still do have a traditional shifter. So obviously this is super easy to use. You just pull back for drive. You can bump over here to the left to shift manually, or like I already mentioned, you can use your paddle shifters. Heading into reverse, you will find the standard backup camera. It does have active trajectory as well as rear parking sensors, but you don't have the 360 camera. That continues to be GT2 exclusive. And then back behind the shifter, you've got your electronic parking brake hold feature, and your traction control defeat button. Now, we also have our button for our drive modes. Now with this car, the drive modes are pretty interesting. Now, you've got the same ones as you have in other Stinger models, but when we go into the drive, I will discuss kind of how this works. Now back here, you will find a few more buttons. This is for turning on and off our heated steering wheel, our parking sensors, and our auto start-stop system. And we do also have 3-stage heated seats standard across the board. There is no ventilation though. Alright, so moving up here to our climate control. This is the standard dual zone automatic setup. It is super easy to use. You just adjust it with these big knobs and you'll see those changes indicated right up there on the main screen. Now everything is represented physically here, so you can just click these buttons to adjust your fan speed as well as your zones. However, you can also make some adjustments up here if you prefer to do that. And now that brings us up here to our audio system. Now, since this vehicle, like I said, has a mixture between the GT and the GT1's features, this is one instance where it's got the GT1's advanced Harman Kardon sound system. So we'll go ahead and take a sample to this upgraded sound system. Yeah, this is an absolutely phenomenal sounding system. The last Stinger we were in actually had the bass sound system since it was the 4-cylinder model. But this here Harman Kardon sound system is definitely worth the upgrade. It is an excellent sounding sound system. Alright, so now that brings us up here to our Kia Yuvo system. Now there's nothing particularly different about this for the GTS. So I'll just click through a few different features. So this is 8 inches. You have your home screen. You also have standard navigation with this bigger display. So as you can see, you have your traditional map. You can pinch to zoom. Graphics look very good and it is very responsive. Now you can click this all menus button. This is where you'll find all the rest of your applications. Two of the most important ones, of course, are Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, which are both on board. But really, as far as your other features, this is pretty much the same as all the other Kias. So I'll go ahead and refer you over to our very detailed, dedicated tech help video. A link to that is provided in the video description. And moving on up here to the mirror, we do have an auto dimming one. And then turning over here, you'll notice that we actually have the moonroof. This is yet another one of the features that's shared with the GT1 instead of the GT. So it's kind of a mixture, almost between a standard size and a pano, since it goes back a little bit further than normal. And as you can see, you do also have a wind buffer as well. And while that's closing, I'll point out one of the other GTS exclusive features, and that's this headliner. It's made from a premium suede material. I forget exactly what Kia is calling it. It does have a specific name, but it's basically a really upscale suede that matches with this Alcantara that's on the armrest as well as the steering wheel. But all in all, the Kia Stinger has always had a really lovely cabin, especially when you go for the GT trim levels. And this specific GTS simply adds to the experience by adding in these special elements that just make it feel even sportier and even more special. But anyways, that does it for what's up front. So now I'll go ahead and hand it off to my brother Mason, who will check out all the back areas. Alrighty, so heading around to the rear seat of the 2020 Kia Stinger GTS, you aren't going to lose out on any practicality over the regular Stinger model, so you're still going to find 36 inches of rear legroom and 37 inches of rear headroom, which is a very impressive amount of space. It's actually larger than the Audi A5 Sportback. Now turning over to the door trim, of course it is a beautiful design, just like any other Stinger, so you do have leather wrapping all through here, and also here on your armrest, as well as a power window. Now down below that we do have some bottle storage, and a little more storage off to the side. And the seat itself
is a beautiful design. It is perforated and very comfortable. Now here in the center, Kia does give you plenty of features in the Stinger GTS, so you will find standard rear air vents across all of the models, and you can adjust your temperature right here. And down below that, you will also have a 12-volt power outlet, as well as a smart charging USB port. Now it is worth noting that this does share equipment with the GT model, so you're not going to find heated rear seats like you would on the GT2. Now here in the center, we do have a fold-down armrest with the cup holders inside. Now as far as rear legroom is concerned, like I was mentioning, this is actually very large. So we have plenty of space behind your seating position. I probably have about, I would say, at least 10 to 12 inches of rear legroom, and my feet can easily slide up underneath the seat. Now the rear seats of the GTS do also fold 40-20-40 split, so all you have to do is look at this little lever and pull it, and it does fold right down. Now heading around to the trunk of the Stinger, it is actually not power because this does share equipment with the GT like I was mentioning earlier, so just pull on the lever to open it. And once you get inside, you are going to find another very practical space in the Stinger. So you're going to find 23.3 cubic feet of space behind these second row seats, and we actually do not have a number with the seats folded all the way down, but I would suspect it's actually quite a bit, so you're probably looking at 40 cubic feet or higher. Now as far as how Kia finishes it back here, we do have a very nice cargo cover, as well as a good carpeted floorboard, and underneath we do even have a spare tire. Now off to the side we do have some LED lighting, and it is worth mentioning that this is larger than the Audi S5 Sportback, which is kind of its biggest rival. Now coming over to the passenger seat, it is 8-way power adjusting. And in front of the passenger, of course, you do have really nice materials, as well as a good sized dampened glove box. And it does even have a very nice felt lining inside. Now up top, we do have a sun visor with an LED light and mirror. And it does also detach as well as extend. Alright, well that pretty much sums up all of the practical stuff about this all-new GTS Stinger. So now let's go ahead and get out on the road and see the real reason why you buy a GTS.
Alright, so let's go ahead and talk about the powertrain. Now for the GTS, it is a GT of course. So you do share the same powertrain as the other GT models. So what you'll be looking at is their 3.3 liter twin turbocharged V6, and that produces 365 horsepower and 376 pound-feet of torque. It's definitely great power numbers.
That's awesome.
Very comparable with the performance German vehicles. As far as your transmission, that's also an 8-speed automatic transmission. And you do have the choice between rear and all-wheel drive with this model. Now, I kind of already talked about it just briefly, but we do have what is called the D all-wheel drive system. That is a newly developed system, and that's exclusive to this GTS. Now, what that does basically is make an all-wheel drive system, but it is heavily rear biased, essentially. So you have a lot of control over how much power you want to send to the rear. So you control that with your drive mode. So when you're in the default comfort mode, up to 60% of the power can go to the rear, and then that escalates up when you go to the sport mode. Then 80% can go to the rear, And then when you go to what they're calling a drift mode, that's right, you can actually drift a all-wheel drive vehicle. So that's kind of what's special about it. Up to 100% can go to the rear. So it's a very unique system. Like I said, that's different from all the other GTs with their regular all-wheel drive system. And they also have added a mechanical limited slip rear differential. Now, as far as your fuel economy, that stays the same as the other GTs. So you're going to be looking at 17 city, 25 highway, 20 combined. But anyways, that's enough of the jibber jabber. It's time to take it out on the road. Hitting on the gas there for the first time in the Stinger GTS. Oh yeah.
Wow. Very, very powerful.
Now our previous Stinger experience, probably 2-3 months ago, that was in the 4-cylinder model. So this is our first time with this GT engine here. You can definitely tell the difference. I mean, I had no doubt about that, but you know, it does make a substantial difference. I mean, it really puts it in a new league, having that much power, 365. You know, this is a serious performer up there with like Audi S models, for instance, or like M340i type of deals. You know, I mean, so it's a serious performance car.
You have to remind yourself of that because, I mean, with this price tag, it wouldn't seem like it would compete with that.
Oh, absolutely not.
You know, it does. Once you push the gas, you realize that it does compete against those vehicles. And I mean, when you look at the outside, you do too.
So much power, so easily available, just right there on tap.
Yeah, that 370 pound-feet of torque really pushes you back in your seat when you take off.
Yeah, it's just something that just kind of instantly puts a grin on your face. You know, it's just something special when you drive a car like this. Now, being the GTS doesn't take away from the fact that this is a comfortable car. They didn't change, like, you know, it looks pretty hardcore on the outside, but they didn't change things, like, to make it real uncomfortable or anything. This is still a great Grand Touring vehicle, you know, just because it is so comfortable. We're just rolling down the road here, you know, it's super quiet in here.
I mean, we said it in the Stinger 2-liter review. The Stinger really does ride like a luxury car. You really can't tell that much difference from this, like, in a German luxury vehicle, which is definitely a compliment. And that, you know, like you said, the GTS does not take away from it. It's super comfortable. My seats are really comfortable. And, you know, we were on a highway just a little bit ago, and it was extremely quiet in here still.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the engine, it makes a very pleasant sound. But, you know, when you're just cruising, it does fade into the background, which is very nice.
See, I mean, it's so rough, you really can't feel anything transfer into the cabin.
Yeah, you just can't help but just to smile, you know. Like I said, I mean, that is serious elite performance. You know, this is on par with things that cost, gosh, like $20,000 more than this car. You know, I mean, that's just what people love about the Stinger in general, whether you're talking about the base 4-cylinder vehicle or one of these higher end GT models. It's just extraordinary value. I mean, you'd expect at this price tag that you'd be making substantial sacrifices over a German vehicle, and you're just not. Now we're out on a country road, and this vehicle is extraordinarily confidence-inspiring. It feels so buttoned down. You can just tell this thing has tons of grip. You know, of course, we do have all-wheel drive, so you have even that extra assurance without sacrificing the fun factor of rear drive with the D all-wheel drive. But yes, it's super buttoned down. It has a very athletic feel to it. Your steering is very accurate. You can turn the steering wheel just like about 2 centimeters and you have, you know, just instant response. That's all it takes, is just a little turn to keep things right on track. You know, it's just a car that you just instantly feel comfortable in. Now what I'm going to do is go ahead and click it into the sport mode. Like I said, there's a lot of different drive modes. We were started out there in the comfort mode. That's kind of the default, you know, where you have 60% of the power to the rear. So this is the sport mode. Now 80% of the power will go to the rear, but we'll see also if anything else kind of changes, what we can feel is different. Now, you know, naturally, throttle response is, you know, a lot faster, definitely tuned to be sportier, but boy, you can really tell it's very pronounced how the power is being routed to a different place, you know what I mean? Mason can probably tell as well.
I could.
You just have this sensation of that you just switched from an all-wheel drive vehicle to now all of a sudden like a rear drive vehicle. It just, you have the push from the back. Really, it's really unique. I don't think I've ever driven any vehicle where I was like in control, where I could just switch. Alright, I had all-wheel drive, now I want it to be rear drive, and just have such a pronounced difference in feel. Usually the cars just kind of handle this stuff automatically. It might be rear bias, but when you get on the throttle real hard or something like that, it's going to send power to the front to give you all the grip. But this one here, you're in complete control. They're added that so that you can have, you know, fun. You can even get like a little frisky or whatever, you know, put it in drift mode and kind of do some oversteer with an all-wheel drive vehicle. You know, that's just really unique. Very impressed by having that type of customizability.
Yeah, just driving on this country road here, you can really tell that this car is at home here, and you know, that's especially awesome because of the comfort, you know, we were talking about in the city, but then when you get it on one of these back roads here, it just feels so, I mean, it feels like it's at home. I mean, it loves this type of environment, and it can just fly and do everything very, very driver focused.
While we're stopped here at this stoplight, I did want to mention the looks of this vehicle and how eye-catching it is. Even when we were in the 2-liter very base Stinger a few months ago.
In black.
Yeah, you just drive down the road and people are always looking at you. It's just, it feels almost weird, you know? Because you don't get that type of attention even in a great number of performance, high-end German or Italian cars, but this really gets the attention. It, to me, we think that it looks like a Maserati, particularly in the back, and it really just draws a lot of attention. Now, finished in this orange,
it's hard to tell what
you
people
just
think
dial
this
that
is.
up like 10 notches. I mean, it's absolutely nuts. But overall, what can I really say besides for wow? I mean, this is an incredible car. It really is. You know, we've been in a great deal of vehicles, like I said, including kind of luxury, elite German sports sedans and stuff like that. And this is right there in line with things like the C43 AMG and stuff like that. This is $20,000 less expensive than they are. It honestly gets more attention than they do, and the performance is just right in line with them. It just puts a big grin on your face.
And then you have the practicality of a hatchback.
You also
as
have
well.
a sportback practicality. I mean, I really can't come up with honestly really anything bad to say about this car. I mean, it really is one of the best cars that I've driven. I've thoroughly enjoyed every second of this drive, and I would recommend, if you're in the market for a sports sedan, you've got to come check out the Stinger GT.
Alrighty, and now let's go ahead and discuss the pricing for this new Stinger GTS. Now, one of the things that actually surprised me the most is that this is not the most expensive Stinger you can buy. So for the very base GTS rear-wheel drive model, you're going to be looking at a starting price of $44,000, which, like I mentioned, is cheaper than the GT2, so that's something to consider. Now, if you want to go for the D all-wheel drive system like what we have here, that's going to be $46,400 as a starting price. Now, we do have a few different just dealer-added accessories. So we have carpeted floor mats for $150, as well as remote start for $495. And then finally, when we add in the destination charge of $995, you're looking at a price of $48,040 for this particular Stinger GTS, which I have to admit is just an absolutely insane value, especially for how cool this car is. And, you know, its driving dynamics. You know, this goes against a lot of German luxury vehicles, and not to mention those are going to be way more expensive than this, and I think you're going to get a lot more looks in this orange Stinger.
Well guys, we hope you enjoyed watching the very first in-depth look at the 2020 Kia Stinger GTS. Please hit those like and subscribe buttons if you haven't already, and we'll catch you next time as we sample more of the latest automotive delicacies.